Hello and welcome, HeirofCarthage here. Not too long ago, I made a video regarding war wagons, and I asked the question, the rather lamely phrased question, were they your wagons? Yes, even I could come up with the rhyme with war. Yes, so even with my low IQ, I was able to do that, but some of you made a good point. Sorry, I'm done bashing myself, but I have to have some fun at my own expense. Some of you all asked, Air, how come you didn't show them against Outriders? Well, because I guess the intent of my video was to focus solely on war wagons and whether or not I thought they were potentially a decent unit. And I hadn't thought of initially comparing them to Outriders because to me they're very different. However, I thought about it and I was like, you know what, fair point. Let's see how they compare to some other units in the Empire roster. Now, the Empire roster has multiple options when it comes to armor-piercing missiles. And I've picked three very common ones here. And we're going to look at these today and look at how they compare with each other in certain idealized scenarios. And I say idealized scenarios because testing things in Warhammer 2, much like any Total War game, it's very much going to depend on the player, the skill level, your opponent, the opponent's faction, their army picks, their magic. There's going to be a lot of factors at play. However, by taking a few simple mechanics, so in this case, damage per second output, and looking at it, we can probably gain an idea and get an understanding of how these units trade off. So we'll look at the DPS, or damage per second. We'll look at survivability and a few other factors here that we'll discuss, like mobility. In any case, just the three units: Handgunners, Outriders, not the grenade launcher variant, just Outriders, and War Wagons. These come in at 600, 700, and 850 respectively. And they are each going to have certain pluses and minuses. I will discuss those at a high level when we enter the battle and try and summarize those for you. But let's go ahead and jump into the battles that I set up for you. Go take a look at what happens, and then we'll discuss kind of the pro and con of each of these units and maybe what situations they would be best suited for. Now, I actually tested this against myself. I have two computers in my studio, and so I actually tested against myself. And while I'm loading this up, I know this may not be the most exciting thing, but I'm going to talk while this is loading so I can give you all the setup of this test. I picked 6 Ragnarok spiders, and then I picked 2 each of the 3 units that we're discussing. 2 Outriders, 2 Handguns, and 2 War Wagons. I picked the Ragnarok spider because it is a single entity monster with high armor, and I figure that all of these units should excel against a single entity monster with high armor. And the objective of this test was to bring each of the 6 units that I'm testing within range of their respective Ragnarok spider, and then and only then engage fire at will at the exact same moment so that we can ascertain some key differences between these units and understand how they'll perform in this function, which is an idealized test against a highly armored single entity monster. I'm going to fast forward, get my units ready to fire. I have to get each of them, and I'll show you what I'm doing. I'm taking my time, and I'm getting each of them into roughly the same position where the spider is near the edge of the range, but not all the way to the edge of the range. So I'll be making some fine adjustments to each of these units. This is not going to be perfect science, the way this is going to work, but once I get them all lined up in a way that I feel like is pretty accurate, and that's why I've used 2 of each unit, is just to give us an idea on where things should land. So again, this is rather idealized. We're hitting the creature near max range. The creature will not be attacking us back. It will not be moving. It won't be blocked. And we're going to be shooting it from the front. So, like I said, this is a near idealized scenario. When I open fire with all my units, we're going to learn a few things. Which units fire the fastest when something comes into range? Which unit does the most damage in the shortest amount of time? Which unit maybe gets the best value? And so that's what this test can teach us. However, obviously, there's going to be a little more discussion to things than that because cost and other things come into play. So I accidentally fast-forwarded there and missed it, but I wanted you all to see that whenever I turned on the fire at will, the War Wagons were the first to fire. They have the highest fire rate. You can see that they're firing almost non-stop, but their DPS is rather low. If we scoot down here to this end, you'll see that the Outriders, even though there's only 45 of them at large settings in each unit, are keeping up very well with the 68 handgunners. So the Outriders are probably, on a per model basis, outputting the most DPS as a unit right now, and on a per unit basis, definitely seem to be doing that. So the Outriders are winning the race in terms of causing the most damage as quickly as possible. The War Wagons, like I said, were the first to fire. And then the Handgunners are kind of riding in between the two right now. But I think another thing we'll want to see in this test is ammunition efficiency. So how much damage do they cause, and then how much ammo do they have left? So again, in an ideal scenario, let's say that your unit lives at the end of the battle, how much damage can it do? What's its potential? Can it take out one monster? Can it take out multiple monsters? So we will see. As you can see, the Outriders are doing a very good job of killing the monster the quickest, but you'll also notice that their ammo supply is already running quite short. They're down to under 10 volleys each, and they're going to finish off their monster with some ammo to spare, where as you can see I still have 27 volleys left with the War Wagons, but they've caused far less damage to the monster in the same amount of time. So a single Outrider here was able to do some damage to a monster very quickly. The Handguns were quite efficient with their ammunition. They both routed their monster and still have 16 volleys each. And you'll notice that the Handgunners actually have the longest range by about 15 meters. So they have the longest range. The War Wagons are going to be the most highly armored, and they have a shield. And or I say that, they do not have a shield. I apologize. The War Wagons are going to be the most highly armored, and they're going to be the most hit points per model because we only have 3 models. But they're going to do the slowest damage per second. As far as the other features of the War Wagon, they have a 360-degree arc of fire, and they have fire whilst moving. They have a speed of 50, which leaves them squarely between the Handgunners at 33 and at the Outriders at 84. I said squarely between. I haven't done the actual math on that, but roughly between them, right? So the War Wagons have the mid-tier speed mixed with highest tier survivability, and that's going to be their real benefit. So they have pretty good mobility, excellent rate, like an arc of fire. They have the best arc of fire because it's 360 degrees, and then they combine that with the medium tier speed. But the trade-off is they get the lowest damage per second. So that's your trade-off on getting into the War Wagon. There is one other benefit with the War Wagons I want to go ahead and call out, which is their line of sight is not as easily obstructed because they sit up higher. It can still be obstructed, but it is a little bit better than other units. Outriders also have slightly better line of sight than a unit on foot. The Outriders are going to have the highest mobility, but pretty low survivability, probably the lowest, because they have even fewer models than the Handgunners, and they're going to be just as bad in melee. But they're going to have the highest maneuverability. Their arc of fire is standard, it's only in front of them, and they can fire whilst moving, but they have to turn to face an enemy to fire. The Handguns cannot fire whilst moving, and they have the same arc of fire basically as an Outrider. They have better range, they have the lowest speed, and the lowest survivability, I guess I would say, with 20 armor. So these are going to be the easiest to be killed, but they will do the most damage, they will do it the fastest, and they will do it with the most ammo left over. But they will have the worst line of sight, the worst speed, and the worst survivability. So each of these units gives you some trade-offs for some advantages. Now, again, this was a single entity monster test. Let's go look at another test which I thought might be interesting, which would be against heavy cavalry, and I'll discuss why. Okay, the second test I set up was against Dragon Princes. Dragon Princes are a very high armor. They have a bottom layer shield, a bronze shield in terms of their missile block chance, but they have a missile block chance. They have high armor. They're a heavy cavalry, and heavy cavalry tend to come with about 45 models per unit. And one of the things that could be interesting in these fights is, do the War Wagons kill unit models of a heavy cavalry faster than the other units? So could War Wagons provide a niche in being able to, since they have higher damage, can they kill off unit models faster than the others, and thus be potentially useful because they are somewhat survivable with their armor, and they can't outrun a heavy cavalry unit, but they can stay in front of it better than a handgunner. Whereas the Outriders, we know, are going to output excellent damage, but the Outriders are going to have to be facing their target to fire. And as most of you know, most players, if they do come within range, of your missile cavalry. They don't intend to just sit still and let you shoot them. They're probably going to be pursuing you. So I've set up an idealized situation again where we're standing off apart from these targets, and we're going to just fire at will at the same time. I'm not going to pursue with any of the dragon princes. They're just going to sit there and take it. And I'm going to go ahead and let this unfold. I'm going to hit fast forward and kind of let you all see what happens. I'm still kind of tweaking a few of my units. If we look, the most damage, once again, easily comes off the handgunners, which is over here on this other side. So I'll zoom over. And they lost 2 unit models on those initial volleys. So already 2 kills for the handgunners. Let's pause it. So in the exact same amount of time, did we see the same amount of damage and the same amount of unit model kills from the war wagons? Well, the war wagons caused considerably less damage to both their targets, and they don't have a single unit model kill. The Outriders caused the most damage, similar to the single entity monster, though I would say it's pretty close with the handgunners right now. And they have a similar number of kills, albeit, I say similar, it's actually slightly, well, it kind of trades with the handgunners. They're getting roughly the same number of kills. So right off the initial couple of volleys here, it does not look like the war wagons will be more effective at picking off unit models in a heavy cavalry, which was something I had wondered. And let's go take a look at what the reasoning might be. If we're watching the war wagon fire, it's not hitting the same models every time. So sometimes the bullets are hitting different models. Sometimes you're getting block chances that succeed. Sometimes you are not. And so it actually is kind of spreading the damage across multiple models. And so despite having the higher damage overall, you're still not seeing the unit models drop as quickly as you might expect for something with that high a missile damage. So overall, Outriders appear to be the most effective if your objective is to kill heavy cavalry as quickly as possible, whereas handgunners still seem to be quite effective, but not as effective as the Outriders in this regard. And again, the same things are going to apply to each of these units in terms of mobility, survivability, arc of fire, all that type of stuff. The same things we discussed in the first battle still apply here. So as you can imagine, if the dragon princes were on the move, the handgunners would be the hardest to use because they would have to do the most repositioning potentially. They're the slowest to reposition. They cannot even attempt to run away from the dragon princes. The Outriders can outrun the dragon princes, albeit barely, and they would have to be very careful so as to not get caught when hitting charge speed, but they also have to be facing the target to fire. The war wagons cannot outrun the dragon princes. However, they could basically be annoying to them and drag them back to the waiting arms of your own heavy cavalry or lord or something that's going to help protect them. So the Outriders are going to also have a benefit to a lot of players of requiring probably the least micromanagement. They can be set and forgot in many cases because they fire in that 360 arc, but they also do the least damage. So again, we see that trade-off come into play. The Outriders had to spend all of their ammunition, and one of them actually didn't quite rout their Dragon Prince. One did. The handgunners are, again, the most efficient in terms of ammunition. They've caused the most damage, still have a very nice amount of ammunition left. And if I fast forward and show you the war wagons are going to fire and fire and fire. They will actually use up all their ammunition. That was a chain rout due to army losses. I don't think they would have actually quite routed their unit, and it took them considerably longer. The war wagons still got less kills, even over the considerably longer time that they were firing. So, again, we see kind of the same behavior portrayed here, which is that there's a trade-off between these three. And we'll talk more about those again here in a minute, but you can see that the trade-offs roughly equal in terms of the unit value and number of kills. However, the rate of kills on the Outriders was the highest, but the value and number is pretty close between the handgunners and the Outriders. So let's take a look at one more scenario. I wanted to test one more thing and show you all. All right, this last test, I would have preferred to use Chaos Warhounds. They weren't available to me because I don't have the DLCs with my second Steam account that I'm using for this testing. But I have charged every single unit of the skirmishers with a unit of direwolves. Now, I wanted Chaos Warhounds because Chaos Warhounds can actually rout on leadership basis. And I'm charging every unit, and we're going to take a look at how well it does the damage before it gets charged, and how well does it survive once it gets charged. So, like, how quickly would you need to get reinforcements to help it? And you can see the handgunners just die near instantly. They're already gone. They were already caught, and they were easily routed by the dire wolves, easily routed, and immediately shattered. There was just no hope. Like, so getting support to your handgunners would have to be almost immediate, or else the dire wolves would ruin them. Look at this. The war wagons were caught faster than the Outriders. You can see the Outriders are just on skirmish mode. And so again, we're kind of testing this, assuming that the player is going to let their unit run away on skirmish. Look at this. The war wagons were caught, but they cause a ton of damage to the dire wolves. Now, this is not a very effective trade, and in a normal battle, you probably wouldn't see someone just leave their war wagons to fight dire wolves. But what this is showing you is that I can very easily get reinforcements in time to my war wagons before I've even lost a single unit model. Look at this. I have all 3 unit models, so I haven't lost any ammunition, I haven't lost any unit models, and I could have easily brought in reinforcements and saved this war wagon. The Outriders get caught, and when they do, they rout very quickly, though it does take them longer to get caught. So their highest mobility level means that they will take the longest to be caught, but when they do get caught, they die pretty much just like the handgunners do, which is quickly and easily. Whereas the war wagons actually put up a pretty decent melee fight against the direwolves. In fact, this one over here might darn near win its melee fight. And again, I haven't touched anything. There we finally lost a unit model. I mean, what is that, like almost a minute of combat before we lost a single unit model? And again, this test was meant to show survivability against a fast, low armor pursuit unit, like a Fellbat, like a direwolf, like a Chaos Warhound, like a a Wolf Rider or something like that. Any of the light cavalry that are going to be quick and not punch much armor-piercing damage. Now, I would say that there is one more test that I'm curious of that I didn't run, and I may do a quick version of it here, but that is against monstrous infantry with basically the same question. Are war wagons somehow better against this monstrous infantry because each bullet causes a little more damage? I mean, some part of me feels like no, they probably wouldn't be. I can go test it real quick and show it to you all, but I'm assuming that the same behavior is going to hold here. So let me go test that, and then we'll talk through the final thoughts on these units. This is against the melee cavalry, but I'm going to test it just in case. You can see that basically the same story holds true. The Outriders just have more DPS. The damage of the war wagons is not really being focused on any one given entity of the Kroxigors, and so it's still spreading it out. And then the AI kind of gives us a good look here at how those idealized tests don't always work. Look at them crisscrossing and changing which one I'm going to be shooting at. So I have to be careful with my own units here that I'm not cross-contaminating each Kroxigor. I can only shoot it with the one that originally shot it. But in a battle, things are probably not going to operate as cleanly as we see them do in these idealized scenarios. Anyway, I'm going to hit fast forward, let you all see. I mean, the Outriders have had more shots at this point, but they just do way more damage. And they're faster, and again, just as a, this is better versus X, the Outriders the war wagons are definitely not better than Outriders at killing monstrous infantry. They're just not. It could be, depending on the scenario, depending on the army pick, the faction you're playing against, what your opponent picked. Yes, I get it. But in the idealized scenario, no, there is no benefit to having the war wagons. And in some ways, even in they accidentally cross-contaminated my patch right here. I was trying something with fire at will because I thought they would shoot at the one behind them, but they didn't. So we got a little bit of cross-contamination there, but it wasn't too bad. But regardless, what I'm getting at is if you're bringing war wagons thinking, the war wagon will kill unit models faster because of its higher damage, it will not. It absolutely will not. In fact, the Outriders have already killed 3 unit models, and despite these aren't operating on the exact same time frame because they switched up, we still don't have a single unit model kill from the war wagon. Now, interesting enough that the Outriders only have 3 unit model kills, and there's very little hit points left, which means that both of these units are spreading their damage across multiple models versus, say, like if you fired in a cannon, that artillery hit might actually kill a unit model in a single hit, whereas whenever they continue firing like this, it's spreading it more across the unit. See here, they still have 7 unit models left despite having down to about 1,000 hit points. We finally killed a single unit model there. War Wagons. So again, I'm done with this test. I think you all can see there's really no benefit to War Wagons in terms of killing unit models faster. Alright, so time for the conclusion. And, the conclusion's easy. You see it yourself. Outriders are the best. They're the best. Well, let's talk through that. There are some ways in which I agree with that. But, again, remember that I was looking at several idealized scenarios, right? So these were not scenarios of a real battle, which can leave out many factors of consideration. What I would say is that each of these units is the best at something, and you may find one of them more particularly interesting to your playstyle or the circumstances in which you use it more often. Let's discuss each one. If you want the unit that is going to give you the most total damage, meaning that if it survives, it will do more damage to your enemy's army than any of the others, then it's the Handgunners. And at 600, they're actually the cheapest, and they just, because of the way that they work their ammunition, how much they have, if they stay alive, and again, this is an if they stay alive, they will do the most damage to your enemy, period, because they have the amount of ammo and the damage per second and everything to get it done. What you're doing, though, is you're trading that total damage against other factors. They have the worst survivability, they are the slowest, and they are only second tier in terms of damage per second out of these three units. So those are your trade-offs. The two benefits, again, was total damage and price. So there you go, total damage and price. Outriders, if you need to do the most damage the quickest, Outriders appear to be the best. As far as damage per second, they also are the fastest in terms of their mobility. However, they have some trade-offs. Their mobility is good, but they do not have a 360-degree arc of fire like the War Wagons, so they cannot fire while retreating. They have to be facing an opponent. They are certainly much faster than the Handgunners, and again, they output damage faster. However, they will run out of ammunition faster, so they will not do as much total damage as your handguns. So that's the trade-off. You get speed, but for less total damage, and you have to pay more. For the War Wagons, you get the biggest downside of having to pay the most. However, you get much better survivability and way longer before you lose in a unit model. So let's again remember that these were idealized tests. What if you took a javelin volley from a Marauder Horseman? I guarantee you it wouldn't kill one of the unit models in your War Wagon. However, I guarantee you it will kill unit models of your Outriders, and you're going to lose their ammunition. But, on the flip side of that coin, the Outriders volley will do more damage to that same Marauder Horseman than the War Wagon will, and this one's faster. It can do a little bit better job of staying in front. However, the War Wagon can fire while running away. So again, it's going to depend on the scenario, and it's going to depend on what you need. I think War Wagons are probably best suited against single entities, if I'm just being honest, and they're best suited against single entities where you need a more mobile army, where you don't want to be tied down by handgunners, and you want to have the flexibility of the 360-degree line of sight versus the Outriders. So it's going to be very situational. So I wouldn't say that any one of these units is just flat out better than the others. I think that we can all say that the Outriders will do the damage the fastest, and when you look at the cost here, if your objective is to get the damage the fastest, then sure, Outriders are the best. But, again, there's going to be lots of different situations, and you probably should consider those things before you make your pick on one. What do you all think? Did I do this right? Did I do it justice? Was this a good follow-up episode? Get down in the comments and let me know what you think. I would love to hear from you. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. HeirofCarthage signing out for now, and I will see you soon with some more action in Total War Warhammer 2.